Hello. My name is Stu Crair. I'm with the Digital Workshop Center. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of talk about resumes for the tech industry. And I've got a lot of great information here that I want to share with you. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the presentation. As we do this, you're welcome to turn your camera on. I see that most people have not. That is okay. What I would love for you to do as we get started is just go ahead and throw your name and location in chat. We always just, like to know where you're coming from. And let me go ahead and share my screen and get things started. And I will talk about all things resume. So thank you, Daniel from Salt Lake City. Donna, oh, you're local. Very good. Aaron in Newark, North Carolina. Camille in Utah. Keva in Georgia. All right. So we got a nice wide audience here today. And I do want to be very respectful of your time, so I will make sure that I move quickly. Savannah's here. She's going to moderate the chat window for us. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to drop them in chat. You can also digitally raise your hand, and that's totally fine too. I like to keep this pretty open and easy for everyone to be able to kind of ask questions. All right, so first of all, like I said, I'm with the Digital Workshop Center. We have been a school for tech careers since 2006, and our focus is really on professional development. On professional development and making sure that we provide certificates and boot camps for the tech industry. For 18 years, almost 19 years now, I can't believe it's almost 2025, but we have been offering different certification programs. These are all boot camp style programs, live online in a similar format to what you're doing here with Zoom. And so we really enjoy being able to offer something that's a little different than going to university. Our programs empower you with skills, not degrees. Everything we do is focused around job skills. And again, very specifically for the tech industry, we have a lot of different programs that are really career tracks for one industry or another: digital marketing, web design, graphic design, everyone else you can see here on the screen. If you're ever interested in what we do, you can jump out to our website. If Savannah, you want to throw our website URL in the chat. It's a great place just to learn a little bit more about who we are. Our programs are live. You are learning from live instructors. You are always working with these expert instructors in small class sizes. And we do include career coaching, online career coaching in every one of our programs too. As the director here, that is something that I still do a lot of. I enjoy it. Not only did I start the DWC, but I'm really the lead career coach. And most of what I focus on here for the Digital Workshop is helping to shape our curriculums and to do the hiring. So not only do I do the hiring for our own instructors and our own staff, and I'm constantly seeing new resumes almost every day, it seems like. But then I also do the coaching for the students to be able to help them go out and find the jobs. And so I feel like on both ends of it, I really just kind of constantly bombarded with different resume ideas and tactics. And so one of the things I take a lot of time throughout my week is to stay up to date on what the latest trends are across the different industries. I also teach a course at the local university. I've studied information systems. That's kind of my background. But of course, been running the DWC now for almost 19 years, which is wild to say. So what we're going to talk about today, less about me, more about you, is all about skills for the tech industry and how we can really shape a resume to be more attractive to employers who are looking for someone who's coming through tech. Absolutely, everything I'm about to show you applies to any career field, really. I mean, I'm going to focus on a more like a tech-oriented resume, but you could take this and you could apply any of these skills to any resume. So let's first just talk about the world that we're living in with skills-based hiring in the tech industry. Okay, if you are involved in the tech industry, you know that it's definitely taken a little bit of a hit in the last year. It's been growing and growing and growing. And like anything that grows, there's generally a period of retraction. Over so many years of doing this, we've seen this happen many times. In the tech industry, there are still a lot of great jobs out there. There's a lot of studies that back this up. Even without a 4-year degree, if you can get a certification, you can go find what we would consider a good job, which is generally a job that is, paying a decent salary, livable wage salary. Um, but there are there's constantly a shift around how the tech industry works, and so right now there's just been a little bit of a retraction of jobs across all things IT. And so what we need to do as people in this industry is always really look at how can our skills align to what people are looking for. And when there is a retraction in the job market and things do change, people are looking for more of how do your skills align versus degrees. And that's probably more prevalent than ever. 67% of our population does not have a 4-year degree, and so a lot of jobs are really kind of focusing in on that more than ever, saying, well, I don't need you to have a degree. I need you to be able to do the job. And so, as we kind of really define that, we consider that skills-based hiring. That's just a little bit more important than ever. Now, it absolutely, is very contextual. We're talking about very specific kinds of jobs. Degrees sometimes matter. And when we're talking about looking at job postings, we're saying, well, that really may be something that people are asking for. So, this is not like across the board, but it's something really to keep in mind. I would say today that, the thing I hear the most when I talk with employers and I go to networking conferences and meetings, et cetera, they're always just trying to figure out, well, how can I find someone who can do more than I've ever needed before? In other words, like a hybrid role. And most hiring managers are saying, I'm really just focused on finding that person who has the right set of skills. And what we generally are focused on is a blend of tech skills, what we call maybe the hard skills, and the soft skills, so that people are very well-rounded when they go into these jobs. And that then also relies on people to also have some kind of experience in portfolio in different industries and things like that. But people are generally looking for that as they are trying to hire. So the first things I would say as some recommendations when we're talking about, again, in tech, that's what I'm focused on today, is number one, it's very contextual depending on which type of tech. Saying you work in tech is a very broad statement, but in general, you need to have a strong portfolio through project-based work. That would be the first thing that I would say you absolutely have to be able to show some people what you've done. Getting certifications, they are a great idea to modernize your skills and show that you are up to date with the latest trends of what people are looking for. It is not going to just be thrown at you, especially when the job market's in a little bit tighter mode around tech like it is right now. So networking and finding other like-minded professionals is a great way for you to be able to kind of make some connections and inroads. So you have to do a little bit of outward bound work there to do that. That can be online or in person. Looking at your resume and figuring out how can you align the resume from the job posting back to the actual job, back to the resume is one of the key things that you can do to make sure everything really is set up right. Continue to develop your soft skills, which are more around theories and ideas of being a good candidate. So that can include project management and leadership, communication, all of those kinds of things. And then finding ways and almost manufacturing ways to gain experience in any way possible. And we're going to talk more about that in just a second. But you really need to find ways to constantly be challenging yourself so that you're building your skills and you're growing your skills and just, staying in that industry, whether that's design or coding, you're just working to move forward at all times. That's only going to make you better. And so if you can't, work for someone else, then we can talk about ways that you can kind of make your own experience. That can be internships, freelance, volunteer, all kinds of different ways for you to be able to get some good experience there. And staying updated on emerging tech. I'm always reading articles, especially, we're all just inundated with content on social media and all that. So we want to stay up to date. That's sometimes a good thing. Maybe follow some hashtags on some of the different platforms around tech and emerging tech and what's new and happening in your industry. That's only going to make you a better candidate. When you really think about all those pieces combined, one of the first things that every employer is going to ask for is the resume. Now, ideally, we have kind of already thought about a little bit of some of what's going to be on the resume. We have a little bit of a goal in mind, whether you're starting fresh, you're already experienced, whatever that may be. But there is a process to how this works for you to be able to really find a way to be successful throughout the whole resume process. So that's kind of my goal here, is to teach you not only how to create the resume, but the entire process around what happens with your resume, especially when we're talking about larger employers, and where it goes, what happens to it before it even gets to a human being. So that's really everything we're going to talk about in terms of refining it, editing it, constantly revisiting it. Okay. So let's kind of get into it here. Let's talk about some basics. All right. First of all, what really is a resume? This is something that's just a term that's thrown around all the time. The idea of a resume today is definitely different than 10, even 20 years ago, okay? Because the technology around how resumes are reviewed has dramatically changed. So a resume today is really just a summary of your career that highlights your past and current jobs and responsibilities. You have to be able to boil everything you've done in your professional life down to a very short amount of text. That is not easy to do. It takes a lot of time and refinement and editing, and it's something you really have to consider for you to, be willing to make some changes constantly. You have to be willing to tell a little bit of your story through specific roles and companies that you've worked for, so that people can understand in a very short amount of time, why are you a good candidate? How does your experience align to this job posting? Just because you've had a job in tech in one department over here does not mean you're necessarily qualified to do all tech jobs. So you have to be really kind of specific and targeted towards what it is you've done in the past and your experience that's going to help you be a good candidate today. So knowing the job posting and what people are asking for and working your way backwards to your resume is often a great way to really think about this, because we can look at the keywords that a job posting is really putting out there and use that as a way to kind of reverse engineer this resume for it to be very much aligned as best as possible. So that's what the goal of the resume is. And so that's really where I start with anybody who's struggling with this, anybody who's new to creating a resume or new to a specific tech field. One of the first things they say is, I don't even know where to begin. How do I get this going on my resume? Well, you have to look at the job postings that you think are a target idea for you, a target position for you. I would say that, especially if it's entry level, you're looking at the basic qualifications, and then you're looking at your past experience, current experience, school, courses you're taking, certifications, and you're saying, where do I have alignment? And then you maybe need to figure out where you need to fill in the boxes and check the boxes of things you don't have, so that you can be the great candidate for that. Sometimes you have to look at jobs as maybe kind of like stepping stones, saying, well, I can maybe start with this one here, and in a year or two, I can work my way up to another one. And so by thinking about that from more of like a keyword perspective, the job posting will give you a lot of ideas about what keywords should show up on your resume. For each job or industry, when something changes about what the posting is asking for, you absolutely have to change your resume. It needs to align. These keywords need to align in every way. If any of you have ever done any web development and you know anything about search engines and search engine optimizations, you should know that search engines really look for keywords on a website, and then they've served those websites up higher in the Google search rankings so that they get seen, they're more relevant. Okay, there's this idea of a relevancy scored around search engine optimization. And it's the same basic concept I would propose to you around what you're trying to do with your resume. You need to keyword align this resume to the job so that you are the most relevant candidate for anybody looking around those postings before. Now, we try to say, we're going to be I should say the target, if I can say that, is around getting a resume to 1 page. These are things that we want to think of as like recommendations, not requirements. Oh, I skipped one there, but I think that is kind of the general goal. And lastly, we're trying to boil our entire professional life down to 1 page, maybe 2 pages if needed. But we have to understand what makes us unique. If someone's getting a ton of resumes, how am I going to stand out in some way? And so telling your story a little bit around that is really key. Now, the typical job process here is, again, very different than just a few years ago, just 10 years ago. This was not necessarily the same. Today, we have what's called applicant tracking systems that are looking at your resume. And this is basically like an algorithm scanning your resume to look for keywords and experience that's going to align to the job posting, just like I said, and make you a great candidate. If you can't align that in a way that is getting past this first step, you're never getting to step two, which is to actually get in front of a hiring manager. And I think that's really lost on a lot of people who are just throwing their resume out to all kinds of different jobs, the same resume over and over, never taking the time to change their resume, never looking at it from a keyword perspective. You're not getting in front of the right person. You might not be getting in front of a person at all. Your resume is not relevant enough for them to be able to even review it. So with that in mind, we first look at how can I satisfy these applicant tracking systems, or ATS as we call them, and then how can I add something to be unique? When you get past that, you get an interview. Now you can tell your whole story. So when we're talking about really boiling a resume down into a smaller chunk of your life and kind of summarizing your whole life, yeah, that's hard to do. But knowing that maybe down the road you'll be able to tell a lot more details, that gives you an idea of saying what's most important. How can I keep removing as many words as possible so that my resume tells a story, knowing that later in an interview I'll be able to tell the full story. And hopefully that then is what leads you to then land that job. A site I use a lot is called JobScan. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Over 98% of Fortune 500 companies today are using some kind of ATS. So, this is just a thing that has become standard. It's essentially like a form of AI, if you want to think about it that way. But there's all kinds of different ways that we can look at how to satisfy these ATS just as much as possible to be able to move on to the next stage. So step one, understand what the applicant tracking systems are doing, okay? These are algorithms based on keywords. If you can align and research those keywords before you apply, you'll tend to get less frustration. Again, the people who get the most frustrated are just the ones who are not playing this game and thinking that maybe their resume just is dramatically better than everyone else's. It's longer than everyone's. You have more experience. You have more, published work. That's not what is getting you past that first step. So you have to play the game a little bit, and sometimes having different resumes of just what gets through to a hiring manager and maybe something for people to look at later. But you have to get these keywords right. And when I say keywords, it's very important that sometimes that really is a key phrase or a keyword. So if a job posting says something like, I'm looking for an expert in Adobe Photoshop, you need to take that exact phrase. And it's not plagiarism. It's a very industry recognized term to say, I am an expert in Adobe Photoshop. In some form, in some way, you need to get that on your resume. At minimum, the words Adobe Photoshop and expert better be on there, but the phrase expert in Adobe Photoshop absolutely needs to be there. We never lie on a resume, and we can be very creative with our wording. But when someone asks for something as a qualification, you better put it on there if you have it, because that's what they want to see. And I do see a couple questions coming in through chat, but yeah, keep adding them in there. I'll definitely get to them here when we get to some Q&A time and some good break points here. But if anyone has any questions on anything I'm saying, before you forget them, throw them in chat or anything related to this. So yeah, by all means, keep them coming. So employers, generally you can boil down to what they want. Okay, what do they want to see on a resume? They want to see, what did you do? Why did you do it? Most importantly, what actions did you take to creatively solve a problem, and what was the result? Okay. So consider this for a second, that when you are putting your resume out there, any any human being, okay, so again, we're assuming you've gotten past the applicant tracking system. Now you're in front of a human being. They are still seeing a huge number of resumes daily, and it is a lot for any one person to absorb. I can tell you from my personal experience, and whenever we put out a job posting, I get over 100 resumes, typically within a couple hours of putting the posting. It is just a flood of information. And this has been going on for years. So this is nothing new because of the tech industry changes. And so what I have to do just for my own sanity and for be able to realistically get through all these resumes to give everyone equal time to actually see who's a good candidate, I have to use some of the different filters around some of the things I just said of look for keywords, and I have to skim through these resumes quickly. So your job in under 10 seconds, which is like roughly halfway down the page, is you have to have told a good story about who you are. And we'll talk about, what that really looks like. But now, what I'm proposing is you said keep it to one page. Well, within half a page, you better have made a great impression. For all these points up here, showing you have a great experience, how you can solve problems within 10 seconds, within a shorter even amount of space, tell a great story. The resume flows like this. Typically, at the very top, we like to see basic contact info. Keep it really simple. You don't have to put your full address. You can put your location if it's a very regional or location-based job. Put a way for someone to get in touch with you. If you're applying for the job and it says it's an in-person job, there's an assumption there that you have reliable ways to get to that job. You are not asking for them to move across the country unless that is something they have said specifically they will do. That's typically for a little bit higher, paying jobs. But if that's something that you are applying for, a job you're applying for, this assumption is that you can be there in person. If it's remote, well, then of course you can do it from anywhere. But put your basic info in there. Show your experience, including measurable accomplishments. Talk about any other experience only if it's relevant to your story or to the job. If something's not relevant to the job, take it out. Highlight your education as much as possible. Again, should be brief. If there's something specifically aligned to the job, you can highlight it just a little bit more. And lastly, I typically like to see a list of skills and interests, which is, again, adds a little bit more like the keyword concept and something that is really important just to add as a kind of catch-all. As a really basic format, here's just like a template I put together. You want to keep things in a one column format and kind of have everything just kind of go easily read down the page. And a big reason for that is that the applicant tracking system really like it that way. It's not necessarily wrong to do it any differently, but as we'll look at some examples here in just a bit, there are times where it doesn't really necessarily help you to do it in a kind of a creative way. I think for a long time, especially 20 years ago when I was throwing my resume out, I was thinking, well, I want to make sure I separate myself from the pack. If someone's looking at my resume, I need it to be different. And now that's just not as true as it used to be. So some tips I would give you, here's a basic kind of resume format that, again, kind of follows that model. And we'll look at some things here that really stick out as ways for you to thrive, okay? I would say, again, well, one column if possible. That's the preferred way these days because of the applicant tracking system piece. Okay, they are just really looking for these headings. When I look at work experience, core skills, education, certificates, those are the headings that are kind of helping break up and give your resume structure so that then within that section, a applicant tracking system can kind of look for some of the experience and the job names and the company names, that kind of thing. Okay, so you're just helping these systems understand you better, which is, again, playing the game that you want to be playing. So those section headings matter. Don't go overly creative with that. I think having the word experience is always very important. Some people say work history or professional history. The word experience has kind of become very synonymous with are you qualified? Every line of physical space here matters. If we're attempting to keep this to one page, again, which is a recommendation, not necessarily required, If you're attempting to keep it to one page, then you want to try to use the space as best as possible. And so any white space here that you can kind of see is really valuable space. And so especially when we're talking about this experience section, you want to try to go as, across the page as far as you can. You want to try to reduce any points here that don't align to the job, and think about every single line really carefully. Is this actually something the job posting is asking for? And if not, consider taking it out. And you can always talk about that point later in an interview, but make sure every point is something that is aligned to what they're looking for. And lastly, I mean, really just try to keep it organized and easy to read. There's no reason to be overly formatted with this, because I think, like we said, it's more of a game against applicant tracking systems than anything else. Try to be consistent. It's really important that people see that you've, watched all your details. And just remember, you're telling a story in roughly about half a page, which is about here. So you're a summary and maybe one or a little bit more of a second experience. That's about what most people are skimming through just to get an idea if they want to keep reading. And that's where you hopefully have caught their attention and they keep going and read the rest. So the summary piece is usually first. This is often a question I hear: should I include this? Should I take it out? I think it's very much a preference. I like that there's either something that's really unique at the top, and it's really concise and memorable, and it's almost like a LinkedIn style headline. So it's generally really short. The like one sentence, maybe two. That's even pushing, if you ask me. Something that really boils down what you've done in the past as a summary and why you're in a good experience, a good candidate for the future. So, the basic structure is merging a background in ABC. I help companies improve XYZ through 1, 2, 3. It shows you've got a background, you've got actions, you've got results. And, people generally kind of skim right through that. But if there's something there that's really interesting and it's, again, well written, it's not written in phrases, I think that can do a little bit of just kind of a nice introduction to who you are. Anything more than that, from a hiring perspective, they don't have time to read it. So, just, again, be realistic that no one's going to read a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph when they have hundreds of resumes to get through. They're reading the first couple words, getting an idea who you are. Okay, let's just kind of keep moving. And so I think it's best just to keep it short. I think all of your focus goes to the experience section. That should be the bulk of your resume. So it is where overwhelmingly you're telling your story. That's where you are getting all of your ideas through around what you've done in the past and how that's going to help an employer today in the present. It is the most important section by far. You want to list relevant experiences. I was talking about relevancy from a search engine perspective. If your website is search engine optimized, you become more relevant and you become a better website that gets higher search results. Again, that's not the exact comparison here, so it's different, but it's also just a great mentality to think about. Your job is to be relevant. So if you are telling something in your experience that is completely irrelevant or out of the realm of what they're asking for, take it out. Add a different way of saying it. Add a different line to one of the other jobs you've had that tells that relevancy better. And then use the time later to tell the story of something that you might have taken out on the resume. So it still can be something you can talk about. It's just not something that needs to be there for resume purposes. Again, these are recommendations and experience. I would say, roughly 3 to 5 bullet points with actions as the first word for each bullet. That's really what we want to see there. So some tips here just for the experience section. Okay, so this is, some good takeaways. We will absolutely, make all this available to anyone, but, I always encourage you to take some notes, especially on this part. So first of all, we're talking about experience. Study the job. That's the most important thing. We keep saying that, but study the job and figure out what's most important to the hiring manager, and then reprioritize your experience section to align to that. If the hiring manager or the posting is asking for experience A and the qualifications, they've got A, B, and C, and they say, here's A, then you want your first experience to be experience A. Make it as relevant and just right in their faces. You prioritize your qualifications to be the exact same as that they prioritize what they are looking for. Then you become a better and more relevant candidate. Keep it brief. If you have an interesting experience, They will talk about it later, but make sure you talk in very short sentences. Start every experience with an action verb. If it's present tense, as you're currently employed, talk in present tense. If it's past, talk in past tense. Make sure you're very conscious of that and consistent on all past experiences are always in past. When you use action verbs, get out the thesaurus and be very confident with the things you're saying. Great actions are I managed something, I scheduled, I controlled something, I led something, I organized something. These are saying I took initiative, I performed actions, and results happened. If you kind of say I oversaw or I was, I was involved in, those are just weaker actions from language standpoint. So demonstrate your impact on every single word and because we're keeping it brief, because we're using less words, hopefully, really try to demonstrate that very, very calculated. As much as possible, use measurable accomplishments. Okay, so we want to talk about how my actions led to something happening. There was an increase in sales, there was a better retention, better engagement. Make sure that you're really highlighting that. That's important. Tailor the experience to the job. As I said, you want to be able to really look at what the job is looking for, and don't take up space looking at talking about things that aren't relevant here. And everything should be aligned from hard skills, keywords. And last, I think a lot of people get worried about including every job they've ever had, where I would say that's really a wrong move. Nobody has time to read all that, number one. If you've got a lot of experience, that's fantastic. Take all your experience and now put it and boil it down to what is relevant. If it is not relevant, take it out. Does that mean that you might have a gap in your experience history? Potentially. You could also just put like a one line that you worked somewhere from this date to this date, but don't talk about it in any bullet points if it's not relevant. Or you can leave a gap and then talk about that in an interview and say, if that ever comes up, to say, why was there a gap? Oh, I just didn't include it because it wasn't relevant to this job. That's okay. So, the idea here is talking about experience in context. So if you are experienced and you did something on the job and you can tell someone why on the job this was something that you did before that you can now do today, that's the win. That's the best scenario that you can come across. When you kind of see this example on the screen here, you can see, and also talking about measurable impact, that's even better. Now, some people all the time say, well, what about kind of the skills section down here? After experience, I like to put either education or skills next. And the thing about skills is it's kind of like a catch-all list. It's just this list of I've done Java and Python and JavaScript. These are all different coding languages I've got experience in. But it's much more impactful, if you are talking about it up here in context of I developed applications using JavaScript, React, Node, etc. I reduced load times by 30%. I increased 15% in user retention by my work using these languages. That's powerful and much more of a valuable experience to an employer. So from where I'm sitting, this up here is far more important for you to make sure you're very specific around languages and skills that you've used and the results you got. But having a skills section is just kind of like a catch-all secondary way of saying that. So there's not really necessarily one versus the other, but by far the experience is more important. If you can get that up there, spend your time talking about that and use the skills section as more of just a list. What happens? I get this question all the time. Well, I'm just graduating from a program at DWC. Maybe I'm changing my careers. I don't have a ton of experience. What do I do? Or I'm changing careers. I used to be in career A, now I'm in career B. So what am I do? I need something that is really kind of showing my work. You need to, first of all, just think about how you can highlight projects or experience in any way possible. Okay, if you are new to a field, you have to manufacture how you can discuss your experience. So we can talk about school projects. That's totally fine. I love when people create a section here called projects. It's something that you can be present about. So you can talk about how, hey, I'm taking initiative and I'm working on a website or a project for a friend's business right now. I'm creating it for my own business. Anything you can do there, you're manufacturing the ways to get those keywords and the experience on here. So the school projects are a great way to do it. Taking on any project-based work you can with friends or family or anything like that, I think that's always a good idea. People, like nonprofits are always needing your help. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to talk about how you have done the work. Okay, the actions speak louder than words than you just saying, I've got a list of skills, or I went to school and got a certificate. Showing that you're working in it is what matters the most. So when we look back at, this example, someone is taking the initiative to be working on projects, regardless of if they're paid, that's really irrelevant here. Any experience and any kind of initiative you're taking as a kind of self-starter, that's really valued. And that's something that I think everyone would say, oh, you're pushing yourself, you're working hard, you're trying to get better. And now I'm interested in learning more about you. So the actions here are the most important part of what we're talking about. Now, what I look at from an interview perspective is a very tried and true method of how you want to talk about your experience. This is for an interview, and maybe some of you heard this before. It's called the STAR technique. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. And in an interview, again, now we've gotten through the ATS, step one. We've gotten through a hiring manager. They like what they've seen on our resume, and they've gotten us in front of them, either Zoom or physically. And now I'm talking to someone. In an interview, the best advice I could ever give you is you talk about situations you've been in relevant to the job, talk about tasks and problems you were given to solve and how you creatively solved them by performing very specific actions and getting the results that benefited your company. And the value you brought to that company is embedded into the result of the action you took to solve the problem. So it becomes easy for you to kind of frame your experience around that. And you have a longer time anyway, in an interview to really explain all that. You have time to tell a story that somebody wants to hear and say, sell me on why you're a good candidate for this. Okay, let me tell you, I solved a problem. This was the situation. This is how we overcame it. And I did it. We were all happy. The company benefited. We moved on. That's wonderful. Now, the problem is if we're not at an interview, we don't have time to say all that. So in an interview, we can focus on all this in person, or excuse me, in a resume. You have to kind of really take the first two almost out of it and just focus on how you brought actions and you got results. As much as possible in context of your experience, you're really just focused on that. So, again, a question I get all the time is, how do I boil down all of what I've done into such a small amount? How can I say all these, the STAR technique concepts on a resume? You can't. It's not possible without you writing a short novel, which will never get read. So focus on actions as the first word of every bullet all throughout the resume. If you're talking about an experience or education or a project, anything, talk about the action and the result you got in context. If it is not relevant to the job in any way, it probably needs to be cut out, okay? So, a lot of people, like I said before, a lot of people like to customize their resume. I think that's lovely. I think that's wonderful to add a little bit of graphic capability. Now, this one in particular is extremely graphic. It's very much for a graphic design position. It would be something that as a human being, I would look at and I would say, that is beautiful. That is really fun to look at. There's a lot there that I like, but this would do terrible from an applicant tracking system standpoint. So, again, depends on the job and who you're getting this resume to. But if or you have any inclination that you're going through common channels on a website, like, whether it's a job posting site or the company's website, this resume would not be scored well as relevant. It does look good to an employer. So sometimes it's good to have a couple different variations of your resume especially if it's more design oriented, as we get a lot of design students at Digital Workshop Center. It's good to have some ideas around different designs so that you can, catch their attention in different ways. The last little bit I would leave you with here is that the resume is constantly needing updating. It's constantly needing to be revised. It's almost like a living document here, but really try to put yourself in the position of someone who's hiring for the job you're looking at. Where are your eyes going to go to first? What's going to draw you in if you were the one reviewing your own resume? And what would you really be looking for? What makes you a great candidate? And then find a way to bring that a little bit higher up, maybe emphasize it in some way possible. That's some good ideas around how you can kind of catch someone's attention a little bit more. As you look at a job posting, this is just an example job posting here. Does your resume really reflect what they're asking for? If you're looking at these essential functions and the skills they're asking for, can you work backwards from this and say, I've done that, and then describe it? And again, kind of going in priority order here of the very first thing they're saying here on this line, that's probably what you're going to need to have the most experience around. So get that on your resume as much as possible. Can you reword some of it so that you're, really demonstrating to employers that you're capable of doing this job and doing it well? Maybe they're not being very creative with their wording. Can you say that in a way that you can be creative? Constantly be willing to think about a resume as a living document that it always changes for every job, every day, every posting, and be willing to make those changes, refine, edit. That's just the way that the resume world works today. If you're not getting callbacks or interviews and you're just, especially again, we've talked about the tech industry is in a little bit of a reduction at the time. Right now, change things about your resume. If you just kind of keep throwing it out there expecting to get results, it's unlikely. There's probably a little bit of a problem with the resume and the way that you're going at certain jobs. You're either not a great candidate for those jobs. You need to rethink what your skills are and how you're presenting them. Or you really need to refine the resume in a better way that aligns to those jobs so that it's much more attractive and relevant. And a lot of times just changing the layout, the keywords, everything here, even a wholesale new resume, starting over maybe a couple times, that sometimes is necessary till you get noticed. And the people I've talked to said, I put my job out there for 100 different positions. Yeah, but did you change your resume 100 times? And most likely no is the answer. There are a lot of tools that are really helpful now I use all the time. One is called JobScan. I mentioned that earlier as a good quote. I would recommend that you go check this one out. It's jobscan.co. What this one does is it actually gives you some insight into how the applicant tracking systems work. And you can scan your resume 5 times for free with the free account there. What you do is you take your resume and then you take a job posting and you put them both in there at the same time. And that's going to give you a score. And that's that relevancy score. And it's going to help you say, oh, I'm getting past that first applicant tracking system step. That's not the problem. That I'm relevant to this job. And if you're finding that it gives you a whole bunch of ideas on how to change it or to give you a really low score, that should be an immediate red flag saying, whoa, something is dramatically off here. I need to improve my language. I need to work on this a little bit better. I think, talking with career coaches is always a great idea. We do that with all of our students at Digital Workshop Center. Career coaching is involved in all of our programs. It's something I still do a lot, and I really take a lot of pride and have a lot of fun with that. You can always go to your local workforce center as a resource. Everyone has a workforce center within your county, and so you can go find more resources there and talk to career coaches for free. A lot of online opportunities there too. And so, the career coaching, the tools and resources that we have here, they're going to be at the end of this presentation. All of these links, as we'll share this presentation with all of you here, will be available, including my email, my phone number for the office here. And you can get in touch and you can be able to, learn a little bit more about the programs and how we might be able to help. So I'd be happy to talk with any of you who have specific questions as we go. Thank you all so much. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Hopefully you can fill out the feedback, and I will talk to you soon. If anyone wants to hang out, I'll be here.